Inauthenticity burnout is feeling burnt out from doing things that are misaligned to you too much. It's kind of like introverted person expected to be extroverted 80% of the time. And obviously that's going to exhaust that introvert, right? I struggled, and I struggled in silence because I put this pressure on myself. I should be able to be successful. I'll push myself, and not admitting to myself the parts that I didn't enjoy and the things that I was not good at. I ended up getting extremely burnt out. I remember the first moment that I coached. It was just the best hour of my life, and I felt so in my element. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like this is how it feels to be naturally good at something.
Hi everyone, my name is Varia and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast about building a career you love. Please do like this episode. I promise this will add to your karma, as honestly you won't believe how much each and single like matters for the promotion. So seriously, huge thank you for this in advance. I'm super excited about today's episode because in today's interview we'll discuss a real life example of someone who has tried multiple things early in their career to figure out what they actually want to do. And this journey meant that they pivoted 180 degrees from something ultra technical, actuarial science, to something super people focused, career coaching. So my guest today is Hanan Baba, who started with actuarial science, then went on to do operations and analytics at a fast growing scale up Deliveroo back then became a management consultant at Accenture, and in the end discovered that what she's actually passionate about is coaching people on career fulfillment. So Hanan, thank you so much for being here with me today, and can't wait to ask you everything about all your learnings on the journey, which I'm sure people who are looking for fulfillment right now will find very useful.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I feel like we have so much to get into.
Yeah, oh my God, yes, so let's go. So let's start with actuarial science. How did you choose this degree in the first place?
So I think like most 17-year-olds, really didn't know much about myself at that point. So I guess I just kind of followed what subjects I was good at school. So I really liked math, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I didn't want to study just mathematics because I felt like it was maybe too theoretical. And I met someone who studied actuarial science, and it sounded really interesting because actuarial science is basically very heavy statistics used in the insurance and pensions world. And it seemed quite interesting. So I thought it's an applied version of math that seemed like more fun in ways, very challenging, which I was soon to learn.
Define fun.
But yeah, it just felt like a good option at the time in terms of what I was good at school.
So it made sense. And did you feel like there was any pressure to pursue something that's very technical, that can give you a lot of job options? Like, was your family saying that this is something that you should pick, or would you say that it was purely your decision?
Yeah, so I think at the time, I probably didn't think about this much, but in retrospect, I can say that I grew up in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi. I went to if anyone comes from like Asian countries, Middle East, and I'm sure even in other countries as well, where they have similar cultures in the sense of, what careers are seemed successful. You need to be a doctor, you need to be an engineer, you need to study something like that. I think from a very early age, there was this subconscious pressure to do something of that type of work. So I think it was always like, for me, like I have to do something scientific or, become a lawyer or something like that. And those are the only options that seemed worthy, I think, which is horrible saying out loud, right? Because it's just awful that is the way that so many people think in that part of the world. But it's true, like we're from a young age brainwashed to decide what is deemed successful in society and what isn't. Yeah, my schooling system was very targeted on sciences. So I think it kind of just pushed me down that path to pursue something like that without actually me really I don't think at any time in school anyone asked me like, what are you actually good at? Like, let's explore who Hanan is. Like, what natural strengths does she have? So that just wasn't something that was in my brain. So I can definitely say in retrospect now that I was pushed in a way into pursuing that career path where it probably wasn't the right thing for me.
Yeah. And fast forward to like when you actually did the studies, how did you find it? Did you feel like you liked studying actuarial science, or was it the time already then when you realized that, okay, it's actually not something for me?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about math is at school and at university, it's a whole different world. So at school, math is like very like structured, formula based. You're dealing with numbers. You've got your calculator. And then at university, anyone who's studied any mathematics at university will know it's very like theoretical. You no longer see numbers. You just see letters, Greek letters. So it's a very different skill set in terms of like more critical thinking. And I struggled with that, to be honest. I did struggle with it. And I did enjoy aspects of my degree. Like I really enjoyed the applied mathematics. I think it was a bit more structured and, more formulas more than like pure theory. But I think I started to realize, oh, this doesn't feel what I thought it would be. And I started seeing other people in my degree who were very mathematically gifted excel with ease. While for me, I mean, I worked very, very hard in my degree and I did very well at university. But I noticed that I had to work really, really hard to do well. I think that was the first signal that, maybe it wasn't the exact right fit for me. But I mean, I don't regret it. I think obviously having a very strong degree, it taught me a lot of discipline and hard work. And it taught me I can do anything. Like something is, actuarial science is one of the hardest degrees in the world. So the fact that I was able to be successful at that and, I got a first class degree from a very good university, I'm very proud of that,
You're bringing up such an important point that I think a huge aspect of career fulfillment is if the work is playing to your strengths. And it's so funny that there is a spectrum, right? If you completely fail at something, okay, it's a clear sign that it's not for you, you can't do it and whatever. If you excel at it and it comes naturally to you, then you're blessed. Probably you found your path. But if you're in the middle, it's so difficult to know, like, should you push through and persevere and kind of work hard? Or like at which point do you recognize that actually maybe there are people who you see who are gifted and maybe that's the path for them, but not necessarily for me. I think it's an interesting nuance that is difficult.
I think it very much depends on what type of person you are, right? Like I think for me and a lot of people that I speak to who might come from backgrounds where, they're very driven, hardworking, they want to be ambitious, their families, the people around them are kind of these driven, hardworking people. I think at the time, at least, it's like, well, I just need to do a good job at any cost, even if I'm exhausted, even if I'm, working 12 hours a day in the library, like that's the price to pay for success. And, at no point would I think, oh, like this is uncomfortable, it's because I have to be successful. And that's the mindset that I had at the time. And I know a lot of people would resonate with that, but yeah, equally, there's a lot of people out there who, grew up in different environments where if something felt too difficult, they would naturally be like, okay, no, this is not for me. And I remember at university seeing some people who would be like drop out in second year because they're like, oh, I'm not enjoying it, or like it's too much work. And I'm like, what? Like, how can you drop out of university and start over? Like, just push through, which is, which obviously maybe for them was a very good decision. And obviously now I have a very different mindset about that. But at the time, I just wouldn't even like be able to allow myself to fail.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just that type of person.
And the conclusion that I'm coming to, like seeing a lot of people in their career journeys, is that what you've mentioned about skills is super important. I think for the sake of getting a skill, like critical thinking, like, I don't know, strategy skill set when you go to consulting, like sometimes it's worth to push through and kind of recognize it's not your strength, but you get the skill and you're there for that skill. But then I think ultimately it's essential to land somewhere which will play to your strengths, because I think you can acquire the skill and find it difficult only for a certain period of time. At some point, we're talking about careers which are a long game, and like you can't be forcing yourself to do something all the time. At some point, and people who are energized by what they do, and people who found the niche where they're good at, I feel they will have inevitably a competitive advantage in comparison to you, because they will simply be energized by what they do, and you will be feeling like you are pushing yourself all the time.
100%. I mean, this is like now in the work that I do, this is the number one philosophy that I have, that the biggest hack in a career is being able to wake up and feel energized because, for example, say, I'm really good at mathematical modeling, for example, right? And it's natural to me and it energizes me and, it just kind of flows versus someone who maybe was like at me at university where I could equally do a good job, but it took me maybe 5x amount of effort. Why would I do that to myself when I can hopefully could find something that would just make me feel energized and like I can do something. And it's like what I call like my superpower where I can do something with ease and then I can perform much quicker and more efficiently than other people who don't have that superpower, right? And now obviously I feel like now I'm working in an area where I am aligned to my superpowers and I know that other people would see my type of work and be like, oh, I could never do that, or it would require so much work. But for me, because it's my element, because it's like coming from such an authentic energy that it feels easy, And I don't have to feel always overworked and stressed and burnt out. I'm in flow. Obviously, it's still hard work, but much less than how it is forcing myself to do something which isn't me,
I know we're jumping ahead, but I think it's a perfect moment to ask you. So how did you figure out how are you defining what your superpower is? And how did you figure out, we'll obviously go through your career journey, but just kind of in a nutshell, what is it that you think you're really good at? How would you formulate it for yourself?
Well, yeah, the journey to get to that point was not easy. I think for like 8 years of my career, I was that person who was like, I'm not good at anything. I'll never find my passion. I'm mediocre at everything. I'll never enjoy work. So for me to feel that way and then eventually find it, it was a journey for sure. But if I can summarize my superpower, I would say it's deep human connection and making people feel safe and comfortable and the emotional intelligence and the well-roundedness of my life, which is both from a cultural perspective, but also from a professional and life exposure perspective, which allows me to really connect with people in a deep way and help them get to, profound realizations. Yeah, that's my superpower.
That's amazing. So with that superpower, which sounds very different from actuarial science, let's go back to your journey to see how you have actually arrived at this realization of like what you're good at.
Yeah.
So let's go back to when you're studying actuarial science, you realize that it's not something that's for you. Then you graduate out of the university. What career decision do you make? So how do you explore what it is that could be good for you instead?
With actuarial science, I did an internship in my second year of university. And the first signal that something was off was during my internship, one of the partners told me, what are you doing here? Maybe you should be in the investment team. You don't really fit in here. You're too much of a people person, actuarial science is like all these actuaries just like crunching numbers on desks. And I clearly just stuck out like a sore thumb, honestly. So I think that was the first signal that, something was not right. And I also just was not as engaged in the work as I should be. So didn't end up doing that after university and had no idea what I wanted to do. I graduated and I ended up going to Kenya for 3 months on a volunteering trip and randomly got a message on LinkedIn for a job offer at Deliveroo. And I was like, oh, I love food. That's one of my interests. So I'm going to follow that. I love food. And at the time, this was in 2017. Deliveroo was a young, fun company. Back then, the tech scene was growing, working at Google, working at Facebook seemed like really exciting to work at a startup like that. So I remember I was literally in this house in a village in Kenya, took a phone call interview with one of the directors and the electricity went off and I did the interview in the dark and I got the job offer. So honestly, I would say it just kind of fell on my lap. But I think the reason why I took that role specifically was because it seemed fun, exciting, and I was interested in the company's mission, I think. But again, I think up until that point, clearly very just like all of my decisions were not mine. They were just more like go with the flow, right? Like even my degree was kind of like, okay, go with what society deems good. And even taking on Deliveroo is like, okay, this good option came up. It wasn't intentional. It was like, okay, this is good. Let's see where it goes.
And how did you know, or how did you think about this being better versus actuarial science? Because clearly you saw something in this role that was like a bit better option versus actuarial science. So what was that?
I think it was just so much more like fun and exciting. Like obviously I'm working in a like Deloitte and the office and how serious and corporate it was versus Deliveroo. I went into their office, they had bean bags, ping pong table. The people were a lot more bubbly and open and casual. And I think, again, now thinking about it with my point around human connection, I think I've always just resonated with people who are a bit more down to earth and not so serious. So I think working in a startup, you can kind of bring your whole self to work. And I think that really appealed to me because I just love connecting with people. So I think the people I met at Deliveroo were very different, very fun, very hip. And I was drawn into the energy of the people.
So you were there for 3 years, and obviously it's a great scaling company. The people are great, not serious, which is amazing. So what went, how did you realize that it may not be for you?
I had a couple of good years at Deliveroo. At that time, Deliveroo was expanding massively. It got to be part of various teams growing the different cities in the UK, launching cities. I initially worked in Manchester for 6 months, and then I got moved to the London headquarters. So I moved to London. That was super exciting. I got to try so many different types of projects, and I really did enjoy it for a good amount of time. I had built a beautiful team around me. And then in my final year, I got kind of like, it was a promotion into a global position, kind of like a strategy and analytics position. And it was a big step up. At the time I was 23. I was managing work mostly by myself, coordinating with 13 countries across the world, and me being the primary contact, leading calls with hundreds of people, delivering presentations to the COO. It was a very big jump, which was exciting, but I think I was... now I can honestly say I think there's certain personality types that thrive in that, with the ambiguousness of the startups and being thrown into the deep end, versus people who maybe are a bit more like I'm like, oh, I want like more structured support from my manager, a bit more training, you know what I mean? I think that was something that I didn't have. And I think because of my perspective of like, so there was a lot of deep analytics work and, building out complex strategy documents, which I had no experience with. Most people in my team were ex-management consultants and had, a lot more experience than me. So I was disadvantaged. And then my boss was not very present because he was a very busy guy. I struggled, and I struggled in silence because I put this pressure on myself. I should be able to be successful. I'll push myself, and not admitting to myself the parts that I didn't enjoy and the things that I was not good at because of, as we were speaking about my degree, it's like, no, like you can't admit you're bad at something. You need to be good at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the difficulty is, even by what you're saying right now, how do you know if you're bad at something, or if simply you're not an ex-management consultant and maybe you just don't have the skills, but you can learn them, It's difficult, right?
It is difficult. I think it's a very good question, because I think, I can think of many skills that I've had to learn recently that 2 years ago I didn't have and I would have struggled with. So I do think, it's a mix. I think having a mix of things that you're naturally good at, but things that you have experience in, both can be valuable in different scenarios. So I think, for example, if I had experience working in consulting before, I probably would have enjoyed and done a better job at aspects of the role. But I think there were also aspects of the role which was like the heavy kind of like analytics work, which just clearly wasn't a strength of mine. And even if I had that training and support, I don't think it would have been the right fit. So if I could go back in time, I could now identify, I'd be like, go to my manager and be like, actually, this work is not like 100% for me. Maybe I'll shift into something else. So it was a gap in two areas: knowledge, but then also in other things, it was also a natural skill.
And this is probably a painful experience. Like, what was it like to realize that, okay, maybe I'm not good at it? Like, what did it feel like?
I mean, now I'm talking about it and I feel self-judgment, because like for me to say out loud, like I wasn't naturally good at something, it still it hurts, you know?
Yeah.
It's not easy to accept that, you know? And it's still not easy for me to accept that I can't be good at everything, right? But I think that's the issue. As people, we put so much pressure on ourselves to be good at everything, when in reality, yes, you can be good at everything if you put in all the work. But again, there's all things that we are better at than others, and that's okay. And when we lean into that, we can be super successful. We don't need to be a surgeon, a neuroscientist, astronaut, and a lawyer, and all at once, right? Like, pick something you're good at. It doesn't matter if you're not amazing at everything else. You can excel at one thing, and that's all that matters, you know? But yeah, anyway, that was a very painful experience for me. And actually, at the time, I didn't make a decision about leaving. I ended up getting extremely burnt out. And I think a lot of people speak about burnout in a very casual way, and there's degrees of burnout. But what I experienced was humbling. I know I experienced extreme burnout to the point where like I started developing very bad anxiety, wasn't able to kind of function at work anymore. And for the first time, my life was out of control of my body, which was a very scary experience. Which then forced me to leave my job, and I ended up taking a year out of work to recover from that, and my nervous system to recover from that. So that was one of the most pivotal moments of my life.
And what realization did you come to during this time as you were taking this time off? Did you feel like you need to reconsider something about what you do, or did you feel like you just need to have some rest and come back to where you were before?
That year was very difficult because I think not a lot of people were talking about burnout at that time. And I found it very difficult to understand what was going on. So I had to do a lot of research into what was happening to my body, to my mind, what was going on. And genuinely, like, I couldn't think of anyone who would really understand what I was going through. And I know now that a lot of people go through this. And I call it now, what I was experiencing was what I call inauthenticity burnout, which is I wasn't super overworked, but I was like very stressed because, you know, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, and I was like being in environments that made me feel really uncomfortable. You know what I mean? So inauthenticity burnout is feeling burnt out from doing things that are misaligned to you too much, right? So, for example, for me, doing too much analytical work, presenting in front of hundreds of people without knowing how to do that, that would make me feel very uncomfortable and unprepared. So that naturally raised my anxiety to the point where I wasn't able to perform in the way that I wanted to. And that then just caused burnout. So I think, you know, it's kind of like an introverted person expected to be extroverted 80% of the time. And obviously that's going to exhaust that introvert, right? Because they're not naturally built to be extroverted. While we all need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone, there's a limit, right? So I always say 70% should be within like what feels authentic to you. And 30% is like you push yourself a little bit where it feels uncomfortable to the point where it's not destroying your body and your stress, right? So yeah, that year was very interesting. I learned a lot about myself. And I think just recovering from burnout was so long. It took me probably around 2.5 years to fully recover from that in terms of my nervous system. So I went back to work after that, but the journey was very long.
What helped you most to recover?
Just deep self-acceptance. I don't know. I think just honoring what my body needed and like really slowing down. That year like was COVID, and I managed to take a year out and just allow my nervous system to fully calm down, which I think is a privilege that a lot of people don't have when they're burnt out. And just accepting that like health is everything. And because when I left Deliveroo, I realized no one really cared, right? Like in the sense like I was the one who then had left, and I was the one dealing with extreme issues that took me so long to recover. And I think the realization was like pleasing people or some version of success is not worth it, because at the end of the day, all those people I was trying to please at Deliveroo, or like some imaginary, I don't know, person from my old school or my friends, I don't know, we all have this like, oh, we need to please this person that doesn't exist in life. You know, at the end of the day, they were not there when I was having to deal with the situation I was in. So then I realized nothing is worth that anymore. And it kind of just shattered that like those pressures I was putting myself around success, because I realized like without health, I'm nothing, you know, and I'll never do that to myself again. I'll never put myself in a place where I'm so stressed to the point of my physical health is like extremely compromised, you know? So I think that was a very big realization for me, and things changed from then.
All right. So, and from that point onwards, obviously something has changed for you. You realize that, okay, maybe the priorities you had before around chasing kind of success and high prestige things at all costs is maybe not the right strategy. And how did you think about your next decision at that point? What did you focus on as you were choosing your next career path?
I think the very deeply ingrained thoughts and beliefs around I still need to do something that's deemed successful in society was still there. But in a way, I was like, I will not compromise my health, but I still wanted to be this person, right? So I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I heard about consulting, and obviously I knew from all the people that worked at Deliveroo, they had come from a consulting background and how they built all these amazing skills, and you know had worked with many types of companies and clients, and I was at, and you know a lot of structure, a lot of training from like a big corporation. I was like, okay, this sounds like a good option, even though I don't fully know what I want to do. I'll get the kind of structured support that I need, and it will help me make sure I don't burn out because I have more support around me and structure. And also I'll learn a lot of new things. And yeah, so went into consulting at Accenture. And yeah, to be fair, I got exactly that experience. Didn't burn out for the 3 years that I was at Accenture, and did enjoy it. I wouldn't say I was like, fulfillment and purpose, but it gave me a lot of the skills I desperately craved, you know, in my career around just learning how business works, how to build strategy documents, how to manage teams, all those things, you know, that I wanted to learn properly. I was able to do that at Accenture.
That was the time when coaching started coming about in your life. Can you tell me how that came about?
Yeah. So about 2 years into being at Accenture, I realized I'm still not feeling as fulfilled as I would like. And anyone who knows consulting, they are constantly expecting you to develop and grow and get promoted and all that stuff. So there's a lot of pressure to make those things happen. I started asking myself questions. Do I really want to go for promotion, push through the amount of work that's required for that? And it just did not incentivize me in the way that it should. So I was just constantly questioning like, okay, what I want to do. And since the burnout time where I got really into like self-development and like learning about like my mind and body, I was just so interested in like psychology, neuroscience, like self-development. And at that point read so many books, was so into it. I could talk about it for hours. And I actually worked with a coach while I was at Deliveroo. And I recognized that my number one kind of value, or like even like in a way superpower, was human connection. And I started paying attention to the small moments in my day at Accenture that I would enjoy. I'm like, what do I enjoy? What do I enjoy? And I realized it was always just like those 5-10 minutes that I would have on someone with a call where I felt like we deeply connected, you know, one-on-one, you know. I just realized like how happy those moments made me feel. And for so long, I just discredited it as like not important. I'm like, oh, human connection. Like, how is that something valuable? How is that going to turn into a career, you know? And I think I thought about the idea of coaching for a while, but I think the idea of becoming a life coach as someone who is a mathematician, there's so much stigma with that for so long I was just like, okay, no, like that's not even something I can consider doing. Also, it's like, who's she to become a coach and coach people and tell them what to do, which is not what coaching is at all. In reality, it took me quite some time to and coach and working with a coach to realize, no, like this is something worth trying, you know, and this is something you're very good at connecting with people. You have a lot of knowledge in the self-development space. You also, with my career, you know, and all the things that I've gone through, I had learned so much, and it just felt like something that I needed to try. So I finally got the guts, and I decided, okay, you know what? I read this amazing book. Actually, this was also a very pivotal way. I read this amazing book, which is called Designing Your Life. I think there's 2 authors, but I think one is called Burnout. And it's this concept of using the tech concept of prototyping in your life and career. So, in tech, companies like Apple, for example, when they're designing an iPhone, right? They're not just going to be like, okay, this is the iPhone and we're just going to like put it out there in the world and sell, millions and I hope it's going to be successful. No, they'll build a prototype and they won't expect that first prototype to be perfect. They will expect that it won't be. Rather than looking at it with judgment, they look at it with curiosity. Okay, this prototype didn't work. Why? What went well, what didn't, looking at it with like a more open, curious mindset and being like, I'm not a failure because my first prototype didn't work. Actually, this is the right way to do that. And then it's okay, I'll build the next prototype. And the more prototypes I build, the better I'm going to get at my product, right? So I read that book and it really inspired me to shift my mindset around my career moves. So I said, you know what, I'm going to build a prototype, which is around coaching. I don't know if I can do coaching. There's so much fear associated with that at the moment. I couldn't even imagine. But I said, okay, I'm going to run 2 experiments. I'm going to do a coaching course online. It was a short course that took me around 2 months to complete. And then I'm going to find some clients to practice on. And I was like, okay, my goal for the next year is to have 3 clients where they're not paid. They're just people I can coach. As soon as I announced to a couple of people in my circle that I was coaching, I had 3 paid clients in the first month. And and I remember the first moment that I coached. It was just like ecstasy. I was like, what? Like I had a coaching session. And at that point, like I didn't even really have proper coach training or anything, but it was just the best hour of my life. And I felt so in my element. Like I wasn't over prepared. I just showed up and it was so powerful. And the client she was my brother's friend actually. And she got so much value out of it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like this is how it feels to be naturally good at something and to feel energized by something. And so that happened. And then obviously that was the biggest step, and then everything just kind of happened from there really.
Was it difficult still to transition into this full-time and leave your corporate path behind? Or at that point, now that you have felt so energized, it was almost like a no-brainer?
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't a no-brainer. I think, I think passion, purpose, it's not like found under a rock. Like it develops over time, and also when we speak of like in psychology, like in things like cognitive behavioral therapy, we know that like the beliefs that we have about ourselves are backed up by the evidence that we receive from the world, right? So when a lot of people say, oh, I don't know if I can quit my job, oh, I don't know if I'm good at this, it's like, yeah, because you don't have the evidence to prove to your brain that this is actually legitimate, right? Like you can't just say, oh, I'm going to be good at this. No, like your brain needs to truly believe it, and you need to accumulate enough evidence to feel confident in that, right? So, even though I did have, that was the first step for me, right? Like me doing the first coaching session was a huge piece of evidence that this was good. So then slowly all those fears and limiting beliefs around, oh, I'll never be good at this, or, people are going to judge me, they slowly started to go away. But then, I obviously started to ramp it up a little bit. I managed to get a few more clients, and it got to the point where the evidence was just so overwhelmingly like positive that it almost was like, well, what are you going to do now? You have to go for this. And it gets to a point where the purpose and enjoyment is so much more, like that feeling is so much more stronger than the fear that initially was there. So initially the fear was like, the fear was overpowering, but over time that enjoyment, purpose is so strong that those fears become a lot less significant in the grand scheme of life, that you're like, yeah, I am scared, but I have this and I have to do it now. What else am I can't just, if I'm 100 years old and I look back, I will regret this for the rest of my life, if I don't go for it. So very slowly, for a year while I was in consulting, I continued to experiment with different clients. And then I decided to take a sabbatical. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to pull the trigger and leave work fully. I'm going to take a sabbatical, see how it goes. And if I enjoyed working full-time as a kind of entrepreneur, self-employed person, then I'll I'll make the jump. So I did the sabbatical. Spent 2 months in Athens and traveled around a bit and worked remotely and worked online. And I just couldn't imagine going back to consulting at that point. So I left.
So looking back at all of your experience on the journey of self-discovery, what principles would you give to people who are at the start of this journey? Like they're stuck, they still don't know, they're not feeling energized about what they do. They don't know what they could be doing instead and what their superpower could be. So what principles from your journey can apply to them, which would be helpful for them at that very point?
Yeah. So in my coaching practice, I help people find what we call your inner compass. So an inner compass is a combination of a couple of things. It's understanding what your strengths are. It's understanding what your personality type is and what your values are and what your interests are. How can you understand what those are? I think a big part of my story is the biggest things was the self-acceptance. And for example, if I had done a personality test 4 years ago, which my favorite one is the Myers-Briggs personality test, you can very much see it comes up as someone who's like nurturing, should work more like, they say like social workers, coaches, therapists, that type of thing, that comes up in my personality test. Okay. And for so long, I was like against that. That was my personality. But actually, like, if I just read that and like just deeply accepted, like, this is who I am and I need to work within what I'm naturally like, who I am, like life would have been much easier. So I think firstly, like doing a personality test can be really helpful for you to understand some of your strengths, but also just like giving like deep acceptance. Like if you're an introvert, you're an introvert. Like, how do you make life work for you? Stop trying to be an extrovert. If you're someone who's a people person, you're kind, compassionate, stop working in a company which is a cutthroat, and I think that is a huge piece. And when it comes to finding your strengths, I think it's not an easy path. And if it was, I wouldn't have a job, because it can take a bit of time to really deepen that understanding and nurturing. Okay, what are my strengths? Okay, let's go deeper. What does that really mean? What does that mean? And that's the work I do with my clients. But I would say it's okay. A couple of things you can do is find what energizes you. So doing an energy audit for 2 weeks, analyze the highs and lows of your day. What were the 5 minutes of your day that made you feel good? What were the moments that made you feel bad? And start to what we call like follow the scent. So if you noticed this 5 minutes of my day made me feel good, why did it? How can I amplify that more? How can I explore that? Is it a strength? Is it an interest? Another good thing is like, okay, what do I do twice as well as other people? And don't overlook soft skills, right? Like, again, I overlooked, human connection, connecting with people, like an insignificant skill. No, it's not. That is a very, was a huge signal, Yeah, and understanding what your values are. I think values are the biggest part of your compass. Like, what do you find important in life and what are your drivers? And we all have so many values, like, hundreds of values, but understanding what your top 1 value is and what your top 5 values will give you the clarity when you're in situations. Hey, does this align with my top 5 values? No, it doesn't. Okay, this is why I don't feel fulfilled right now. Okay, so if one of my top values is authenticity or, human connection or honesty or balance or whatever, all these things. Okay, I'm in a situation right now. Is this aligned to my top values? No. Okay, that's why I'm not feeling very good. Instead, let me move towards something that's more aligned to my inner compass. The reason why I bring up this concept is because I think a lot of us think career fulfillment comes from having, okay, I know exactly what I want to do. But actually, in reality, we don't always need to know what we're going to do forever. We just need to make sure we are doing things that are aligned to our inner compass. So for example, I don't know if I'm going to be a coach forever, but I know as long as I'm aligned to my inner compass, and, I'm aligned to my strengths, I'm aligned to my superpowers, I'm aligned to my values and my interests, I know I'll always be happy and fulfilled. And I'm okay with that shifting over time. If my values change, I'll follow them. If I realize I have a new superpower, I'll follow that. But as long as I'm constantly thinking, okay, am I aligned to these things that are important to me? That's all that matters. Because at the end of the day, like, there's not one career path that is right for us, right? There could be 20 different versions of success or happiness that could be equally as successful for us or as fulfilling, right? But it's not about finding that one. It's about pursuing one of them And over time, just making sure you are constantly feeling aligned, and that will shift over time. I don't know what my 5-year career plan is, but all right, I don't need to know, because I truly feel that I have the self-trust and the clarity on what makes me me and what makes me happy. And as long as I'm constantly aligned with that, that's all that matters to me, genuinely.
And you know, this approach also makes you get rid of this notion that there is one cool, prestigious path. So that's what we started with. That's like, you have to be successful at this at all costs. Almost like with this approach, it gives you more flexibility. It's like, yeah, you have self-awareness, but also as part of it, you need to believe that there are many ways to be successful. And as long as you stay true to yourself, there is way to kind of still do great things, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it should be that one thing that everyone is talking about, you know?
Exactly. And life is long, right? Like, you making a decision today doesn't mean that's it forever, right? Like, every day I'm making decisions on how I can iterate and further deepen my connection to my inner compass. And, you know, I think as well, when we talk of like the concept of like purpose, like I always say to people, like, stop looking for your purpose, just look to deepen purposefulness in your life. Right. So it's like, as long as I'm like continuously deepening that purposefulness and deepening that connection to my inner compass, I have the flexibility to iterate every day to continue that and allow for the flexibility and the openness. And we speak about like prototyping around, like, I'm always prototyping. Even now in my career, you know, I've been coaching for 2.5 years. Things are always shifting and pivoting, and that's okay, because I'm not a static human being. I'm constantly evolving, you know? And if I just think, oh, I just made a decision, I have to stick for forever, like, that's so much pressure. But also, like, knowing that even if you do make a decision, trust that your future self will be able to iterate and navigate over time if it's not fully right? Like, okay, you took a decision and it's not 100% right, but it's 60% more right than it previously was. Trust that with that in the future, you will be able to continuously find ways to increase that percentage over time, right? Start somewhere.
And if there was one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self, and for that matter, for people who are stuck in their careers and feel unfulfilled right now, what could it be? Like one advice or maybe one practice that you think was most helpful for you?
Every season of your life has a purpose and a reason. Going through my 20s, I was like, I'm wasting time. Everything I'm doing is meaningless. You know, burnout, end of the world. But now, every experience I went through, you know, I was so focused on, oh, is this my purpose? Is that? But it was my purpose for that time. Because, for example, for me to get to the point where I am now, I would not be successful in what I do now if I didn't have a consulting background, because a lot of people I work, or a tech background, a lot of people I work with come from the corporate world. And right, one reason why people work with me is because they can feel I can resonate with them. So that experience wasn't wasted, because it allows me to now do what I want to do. Me being burnt out allowed me to find one of my biggest passions and interests, which is self-development, wellness. If I didn't have that burnout, I probably would have never explored that interest, okay? Every season of my life gave me a gift, which at the time I was holding on to. I want this gift. I want the gift of finding my one purpose or my dream career. But actually, I always say to people in their 20s, like, actually, most of us in our 20s are in the season of experimentation. That is your purpose. As a 20-year-old, your goal should not be, I need to find my one purpose. My goal should be, let me explore myself in as much as I can, so that later on, I feel really confident about what I want to do. And I've tried so many different things, because the more things you expose yourself to, the more you're going to find the things that you like, right? Like, for example, how would you know you're the world's best tennis player if you only played football and basketball, but then you just stopped there and you didn't explore tennis, right? You also need to expose yourself to different things for you to understand, right? And it's like relationships, unfortunately. Some people find their soulmate when they're 21, but some people find their soulmate when they're 35. But arguably, you could say that the person who found their soulmate at 35, it comes from a place of really like solid understanding of who they are and what they want, and that, which is also beautiful, right? I'm not saying there's a right or wrong. Some people are lucky, they find career fulfillment at, you know, from university, and they love what they do. But for us that don't, it's okay. There's purpose in every step of the journey. And I wouldn't. So going back to the question, what would I tell my younger self? Yeah, everything you're going through, has a reason and there is purpose behind it. It's just not the purpose that you are desperately trying to hold on to. But, now everything makes so much more sense. And I wouldn't change anything in my journey.
And on this journey of exploration, I think what's really important to be clear on is that you're optimizing for this feeling of being aligned and energized rather than the best mix of skills for the most prestigious career that you can get at any point. So that's the purpose of the experiment, is discovering who you are, because that's such a black box and it's like so difficult to do. And you only discover yourself through trying things. So don't waste this time like trying to optimize for something external. Ultimately, it's you and you will have to live with yourself for the whole life. So it better work for your energy levels rather than any like extrinsic purpose,
100%. And you know what? Most of us, I always use this like saying like follow the scent. All of us have scents, or they could be so subtle that things that energize us. But because we're like thinking too much, we have fear, we are looking for some big grand thing, we overlook these small signals and scents. So actually most people I work with, they have the answers already in them. They think, oh, I don't have a purpose, I don't know what I like. You do. Most of us do. You know what energizes you, but you're not paying attention because those signals have not been nurtured or grown enough because you're dismissing them or your fear is dominating your mind. So be curious about, rather than complaining and stressing and thinking big, get curious on the small things and be open and curious with those and nurture them. And don't expect that they're going to be grand and big from day one, but it starts small, but it's up for you to grow it from 1% to 5%. And that 5% will become 20%. And next thing you know, it's a huge thing in your life. And if we all had this open and curious mindset, I promise you, like most of us would feel the fulfillment that we're looking for. But it takes a bit of patience and openness that most of us unfortunately not willing to have. But I think it's just misconceptions of how purpose is grown and misconceptions of career success.
Yeah, it takes patience, and it also takes courage to forget about the concept of what's cool. If you're coming from the STEM degree, like whatever, and then you realize that you're a person who would be like soft and people skills, and you're like, well, what's that? Like, it's not me. Like, if we started from a blank sheet of paper, maybe you would have not had this adverse reaction. But I think we should appreciate to what extent the societal pressure is there, and some stigmas and some things that are considered cool versus not cool. And oftentimes these like forces are so much stronger than any inner intrinsic interest. And embarrassing ourselves is like one of the biggest instincts that we have, right? And I think that's part of the hurdles of really accepting that some of the things that may not be cool on paper are actually who you are, and you should be proud of it.
100%. And I think, for so many of us, we're driven by external voices, and that's because we've never taken the chance to understand our inner voice. When you connect to your inner voice, desires, that inner compass, and you start to trust it because you see the success that comes with that things flow easier. Even when we talk about like people who are people pleasers and things like that, like, I used to be a big people pleaser, but then when I learned like, okay, this is who I am and this is the type of people I attract, I realized I actually started attracting more people because they're more aligned to me rather than me trying to chase things that are not aligned for me, you know what I mean? Or people that are not aligned to me. When you slowly start trusting that inner voice more and asking yourself, what do I feel? What people light me up? Rather than what do they think of me? Asking myself, what do I think? And you slowly start to build the voice, and then you start to see the evidence around you that things start becoming more easy, and actually you start enjoying life more, you start attracting the right people more, and over time the evidence starts growing. Oh, this makes more sense, this makes more sense. And when you slowly start to build that intrinsic voice and trust it, and you see the benefits that it brings you, slowly those external voices and that criticism around like that inner critique of like, oh, this version of success, it goes. Because like I said, at some point, the inner motivation and the inner voice is so strong and fulfilling and all these things. And you start to feel confident that you slowly start saying, okay, I choose not to follow this external, definition of success anymore, because I found mine and I see the value that it brings to me is so much bigger than someone else's.
Thank you, Hanan. What an amazing conversation. Really appreciate you being here with me today. And yeah, good luck with your coaching practice.
Thank you so much.